Perhaps I should just say why I got interested in this. One reason is because I teach courses around film and religion, film and theology. And so, for example, as you probably know, there's been well over 120 Jesus films most recently something like Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, right back to early Jesus films, which were often really cinematic versions of the Oberammergau Passion play. And I was studying those and was thinking, now, what were the background to these, and found myself then looking at passion plays. So that was one reason. The second reason is my mother is an actress, so I've been dragged to plays since I was very little. My memory of plays is often most clearly when something happens which is surprising and unexpected. So, for example, I remember watching King Lear when the whole cast were coming down on an outdoor performance on the castle and the stage collapsed. This is what I remember most clearly about King Lear. It's interesting how the different passion plays and mystery plays that I've seen, sometimes the surprises that have stayed in my mind and imagination. There are a number of other reasons. I have a great friend and a godmother of one of our children who is here and has run very successfully a number of plays in Edinburgh. Passion plays. How many years have you done it there? 6 years. And dragged all the family there to play. So those are some of the reasons why I'm studying. I've also, I suppose, in my mind, I'm working around 3 different areas. One is around what could be described as the history of passion plays, right back to the earliest times. And it's striking how often it emerges, for example, there's debates about it, as there always are in academia, but one claim is that it happened in churches to begin with, in worship. And so that actually, for example, the liturgy of the resurrection, people would reenact that, perhaps in the 12th century, and they would reenact. It's interesting, the resurrection is sometimes seen as the earliest, not necessarily the crucifixion. That's, again, one area of debate. So one is historical. 2 is what would be described as contemporary Renaissance. What I find fascinating is post-Second World War, there was this burgeoning of passion and mystery plays in York, in Coventry. For example, in York this year, they're putting on, you perhaps know this, something that celebrates what went on in the 1950s. And it's interesting to ask why that happened. One reason I think it did happen in the 1950s was because it was a way of bringing communities together when communities have been broken in half because of the Second World War. And you can see that in different places, not just in the UK, but also in other parts of Europe. But then the third area that I'm really interested in, I've been dragging my poor family around, is actually contemporary. In other words, the last 5-10 years of passion plays and mystery plays. And I suppose I've found it fascinating watching different plays. About two contrasting examples I went to last Easter, just to contrast the 2 approaches. One was in Brighton. I noticed you helping on the play in Brighton. I went to Brighton.
Directing it.
Oh, great. Okay. I mean, but it was what was fascinating was just, if I could maybe talk about the experience of going along to it. I went there and I couldn't find it to begin with because I went the wrong way on the beach. And it was Easter Saturday, wasn't it? And there were thousands of people there, and it was packed out. And there was a wonderful singer going on, and I just was very struck by what an incredibly competitive, communicative environment these plays are going on in. And then there was the play, and it was, I have some wonderful versions. It's a stunning location. I mean, absolutely amazing location. And I thought the way in which you did hold the crowd was really impressive, actually. But this, if I understood it right, it was a traditional interpretation of passion play. But then I went to Southampton. Anyone here from Southampton, the Southampton play? Which is completely different. Absolutely fascinating, because the Southampton play was in the square, and that was all that was happening. It was literally, that was the only show in town. And it was packed out. I mean, there must have been, I'm not very good at counting, but 7,000 to 10,000 people there. So it was the central square of Southampton, packed out. We began with this very dramatic role, sort of a media fest for about 2 minutes, and then what happens is they have a power cut, poor thing, so it just stops. And what was interesting there was that it was 15 minutes where we all started talking to each other, and it kind of built up again. But this was a modern interpretation, and it was a musical. And it again was presenting Jesus in a very lively way, a very accessible way. And I mean, again, it's easy to be critical of things, and I don't want to be critical, but I think I want to celebrate that actually it did manage to make that difficult move from the 1st century to the 21st century, mostly successfully. And I suppose those two different, just for me, illustrate the rich diversity that is happening around the country. I could talk about other plays, but those two. Perhaps I could just say, well, for me, this raises a number of questions. One is practical questions, which we could talk about in burnout, which is just physical issues. For example, this room is reminding me of experience I've had in a number of passion plays of being freezing. But also Trafalgar Square, which I thought was, was incredible. It was like sunbathing on the south coast of somewhere very warm, wasn't it, last year? It was incredible. But the heat there, and it's worth, I just wonder, how do you help people in those situations? You already have answers to that, but that's one is a practical. Another, I suppose, is theological. I think there are profound theological questions about what's happening in a passion play. Now, we could talk about that, and I just want to open that up to think about questions about incarnation. That would be one, how Jesus becomes human, how we enflesh Jesus in these situations. But also about emphasis, because I've noticed sometimes some plays, and I think, for example, of Oberammergau, I don't know who got to Oberammergau this time, one or two nods. I was struck by, I think they did the whipping very, very well, and I noticed, I thought there was a bit of quotation going on in Brighton, maybe they took your idea. It was interesting in terms of the scourging, there was a similarity there. I thought the crucifixion in Oberammergau was just devastatingly poignant, and yet the resurrection was a real disappointment for me personally. You may not disagree, but and it was interesting. I interviewed the producer and director about it, and they said, "Well, it's quite difficult doing the resurrection. It's very hard to stage." I thought, there's an issue there. I think there's another issue. There's a hesitation about how do you do the resurrection. So again, there's a theological, because I think there's a tendency in some traditions to want to emphasise crucifixion and then